Hey, this is Dave from metalepidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. What's up guys, Dave here from Metal Epidemic, back with another album review. And for this review, Duncan Kyle and I have been checking out the new album from Philadelphia quintet Alustrium. The band's new album, A Monument to Silence, is out on June 18th via Unique Leader Records. So, Alustrium, I've been on the go for over 10 years now, and so far have released 2 full-length albums. Their new album, A Monument to Silence, follows up the band's 2020 EP, Insurmountable, and also sees the band team up with Unique Leader Records for album number 3. The new album is 10 tracks long and clocks in about 64 minutes in length. I'd never heard of these guys before, but Unique Leader have been absolutely killing it this year, so my interest was definitely piqued when I saw they were putting out this album. But this is going to blow your hair back, people. It is not a deathcore album. I know you're thinking, what? No deathcore? Nope, not a pig squeal to be heard on this album.
Thank fuck.
These guys play death metal of the progressive variety. It's not a million miles away, I suppose, but it is different to a lot of the stuff that we've heard from Unique Leader this year so far. Okay, so Alustrium, what are we thinking of this new album? Let's go to Kyle first. Just let's mix things up a little bit and see what Kyle thinks of this new album from Alustrium.
Death metal Kyle, is that what we're...
Yes.
It is still death metal Kyle, isn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yep.
I suddenly feel woefully unprepared for this.
Keep on your toes.
Yeah. Hello. This one, not really sure what to say about it. It's like, yeah, it's a progressive death metal band. Have I heard it before? Definitely. Like, it didn't really, I don't know, it was alright. I can't really say much other than that. It didn't really stand out as like album of the year or even really album of the month. It was just like, this is an album I could have it on in the background, and I would never know the name of the band. I wouldn't be able to pick them out from a lineup. The songs were good. It was well written. The riffs were well played. There was a lot of studio fuckery is what I'm going to call it. Not a lot, not as heinous as some bands recently, but there was a bit there that I picked up. I was like, really, come on. But I mean, everything was well done, and they're clearly good at writing songs and playing their instruments, but nothing really stood out to me as like, this is a band called Alustrium. It was just like, this is a band that plays technical death metal. And it just sort of hit the middle of the road like, yeah, okay. Although track 4, The Accuser, that actually stood out to me as quite a good one. They did some more progressive stuff into that, and it actually sounded really good. So I think if they lent more into like the progressive stuff than the death metal, they'd stand out a lot more in the large field of technical death metal. And because it's quite large right now, and I think bands really need to start leaning into what makes them unique. And for this, there was just not enough of that. I don't know. I listened to it a few times, and each time I was just like, it's all right, but it's not bad by any means. It just doesn't really stand out as anything that would really tick any more boxes other than being technical death metal. Slightly above average. Yeah, not bad. So, okay. I mean, the production was okay. It has some fuckery, but they do have some good switch ups here and there, like track 4, which I really, really did enjoy. But for the rest of it was like, yeah, you could have cut this down to 6 tracks and it would have been more than enough. So, okay, that's my quick and easy, very prepared take on it.
Fair enough. I'll go next. So for me, this is like straight off the bat, this thing is packed with riffs. Like, there's no denying there is a ton of riffs on this album. Not necessarily big monolithic type riffs that will crush your soul, but more quite lead heavy. You know, it's really well executed, precise, technical. It's got a little bit of streak of melody to it as well. It has that kind of early Between the Buried and Me, Black Crown Initiate, kind of Symbolik type vibe about it. The riffs are very polished, very compact. The drumming is metronome tight, you know, it's switching in and out the kind of blasts and grooves. Some really nice footwork in there as well, nice inventive fills from, I think drummer is Kevin Corkin. The bass doesn't play as huge a role as I would have expected on this, considering the style. It's quite kind of understated, but it's very tight and in sync with the guitar work. But I just, for a kind of progressive death metal band, I was expecting a little bit more from the kind of bass work, which you usually hear on those types of albums. Vocally, I thought it ticked a lot of the boxes. Jerry Martin has a great tone. It's very kind of fitting for the style that these guys are going for. It switches from that kind of mid-tone bark to really kind of low guttural stuff very seamlessly, throwing in the kind of odd high scream as well now and again. It actually reminded me a little bit of
Randy Blythe to me.
Yes, that's exactly what
there was shades of Randy. I actually had to double check later on in the album if he'd guested on the album. There's a couple of things he hit that I was like, this is like encroaching on Lamb of God territory here. So
absolutely, I got that as well. There are some kind of melodic, kind of clean vocals on this as well. Not that much, but I'm unsure if that's Jerry the vocalist or Chris the guitarist, because I think he does vocals as well, so I'm unsure which one did. As I said though, it's fairly packed. It's packed tight with ideas. Not a massive amount of kind of breathing room on this release. It's fairly constant for the 60 odd minute runtime. And honestly, on my first listen, because there was so much going on musically, when I got to the end of the album, I kind of needed a break. Aside from, I think it was Dreamless Sleep, which is a kind of interlude in the middle of the album, it doesn't really let up at all. And at first I kind of struggled to take anything away from it, because I'd been hit with all that like progressive technicality for so long, which I want to reiterate is fantastically done. I can't fault the musicianship on this at all. It's first class. On my second and third listen, pieces of it started to kind of come together more a little. I noticed more of the switch ups and transitions on those listens, but I felt like I really had to pay close attention to it or I'd completely miss it. They don't linger on an idea for very long, especially those parts where they kind of up the heaviness and play it a little more with a kind of groove to it. But the more I listened to it, the more it did start to kind of click into place for me. And I didn't notice, like the first time around, there's actually some really nice kind of blackened elements thrown in some of the tracks, Join the Dead and Blood for Blood. And also there's a very kind of after the burial type feel to the kind of proggy kind of lead lines on the tracks, like Hunted as well. But everything's really subtle. I felt like, as I say, it took me like 3 or 4 listens to kind of acknowledge what they were doing on this. It's definitely in the detail on this album. One thing that I felt kind of let it down a little was the production. It's not a bad production by any means. It's very polished and pristine sounding, but I don't think it necessarily works in the band's favour, if I'm honest. I think sometimes a particular production can make all the difference. Sometimes, like a bit of added grit to it, or something to help elevate, or kind of elevate a kind of moment or a high point on a track. But even when they did transition into those kind of more like monstrous riffs or like something more melodic, it just felt a little bit kind of underwhelming for me. And I suppose that's kind of my kind of only real grumble with this. I wanted more of a payoff type moment on some of the tracks. Nothing really kind of stuck with me hugely afterwards. Although they have musical similarities to bands like Between the Buried and Me and Black Crown Initiate, I felt like those bands have that kind of the flashes of like magnitude. Like the formula is well balanced, but they still weave in those like climactic moments in each track. With Alustrium, it all felt a bit kind of too like linear. It was too constant for me, and even when they do slow it down ever so slightly, it wasn't enough of a change to make me stop what I was doing. And even dynamically, that they don't really have huge moments where they go from opposite ends of the dynamic spectrum. It's there very subtly, but like Worthless Offers, for example, was one of the times where they did really try and lean into that more kind of melodic side. There was a little bit of a kind of Joe Duplantis type vibe happening on that track vocally, but I didn't feel like there was enough of that on the rest of the album. And when they did, it was just a little bit too subtle for me. I mentioned the clean vocals earlier. They appear on a track called The Plea. I think they need to incorporate more of that. I think that additional element and like texture really opened that track up. Adds the kind of light and shade that I was talking about, but there just wasn't enough of it for me personally. And I realised, like, this is just my opinion on this. I fully expect there to be a horde of death metal fans that don't agree with me at all on this. There will be people who tend to gravitate more to that techier, more progressive sound, and that's completely fine. But for me, this album, it just felt like there was a component missing. Yeah, it's a frustrating one for me. I wanted to really like it, but there was just something lacking from it for me. Duncan, what about yourself?
I'm kind of, and weirdly, this is as strange that all three of us should be in a similar boat on a death metal album, because I'm usually the one that comes in kind of cynical. There's no disputing that the musicality and the musicianship on this album is top notch, because it is. On every component all the way through, it's handled with a great deal of almost surgical precision, and I think that's what you guys are kind of leaning into. That surgical precision ultimately leaves the album feeling very cold. There's no warmth at all here, and I know that might sound strange that someone is moaning that I play, but when I mean warmth, I mean personality. There isn't any personality on this album at all. I imagine if you are a death metal guitarist, there's a whole lot to celebrate on this album. It can be very subtle at times, some of the lead work they're incorporating and how it starts to open tracks out, but without without some synths in the background to open it up even further, or more melody like you mentioned before, to make those things really pop. What you get is a very subtle change in what is already a very precision-like delivery. I also think at times, I personally felt that the drums lacked a bit of personality as well. I felt like I know Kyle's talking about studio fuckery, but I genuinely felt there was no dynamic at all in it. I just felt it was all just like the same level all the way right through, and it's not something my ears gravitate to much, but in this one I very much felt like that. I feel some of the songs are too long. There's a track that's just a ball hair under 9 minutes. The closing track is over 10 minutes, which once again they are doing things to merit the length, but without that pop that we're talking about, we're just being carried on. Not monotonous. Monotonous is the wrong word to use, because it's never boring to listen to. It's just there was no point in this where I felt like what is weirdly for Unique Leader, because Unique Leader Records, if you can see anything about that, every band we've heard from them this year and towards the end of last year, their bands have songs that hit you with something you're like, oh, for fuck's sake. You know, it's just like the most disgusting thing you've ever heard, the heaviest thing you've ever heard. And it's usually really heavy because it's balanced against something which isn't. This is just very, very, very... It feels like it's really well written, really well executed, and they've spent so much time making sure that all the riffs are really well written that they've not at any point necessarily thought about what they are adding to the song in terms of dexterity and dynamics. And that's a big drawback for me. This is not a genre that I am a big fan of. I'm probably the least death metal fan out of the three of us. I think it's safe to say that. I don't think we're going to get any kickback. So to me, the thing that I always lean in, the bands that stand out to me within that genre are the bands that incorporate elements that make it transcend the kind of nuts and bolts. And you are right, there's elements of black and stuff in here as well, but when I hear that, I should be disgusted by how I feel listening to that. And it's just, once again, it's managed very well within the songs. So like, my biggest gripe on this band is their incredible musicians that have written an incredible musicians album. It's not an incredible album of songs though, and that's what kind of struck out to me. Very much like Kyle, I've given this 3 listens, which once it's over an hour, so it's 3 hours, and you could play me this in a month's time, any of these songs, and I'm going to be sitting here going, we reviewed them? Did we do that? And I really will, and it's like I say, I am never the best barometer on death metal. I'm the worst, but I don't know. I'd be keen to check out one of the few bands where I'd genuinely be keen to check out the previous album to see if this just is what this band does, or if this is a change. You know, like in that they've spent a lot more time honing certain things that maybe they've lost the oversight of. Like like the actual songs. I don't know. It's weird to describe. Yeah. It's not. It can't fault it for musicality at all. But like I say, when it comes to memorability and songwriting, it's also too long. This album is too long. Technical death metal albums should not be over an hour in length. They shouldn't be. Unless you're incorporating a lot more of what track 6 does in terms of ambient breaks and different quieter instrumentation and stuff. Yes, by all means, if you're doing conceptually on that length, it works. But on this one, it's like you are right, it lands in the mid-mark. It's the only respite you get, but then it doesn't change tact after that to merit that break. It just continues. It just picks up its shop and then continues on. That's kind of how I felt. Like I say, if you're a guitarist, listen to these guys because they can riff like fuck. But to me, it just there's just something. There's an element missing to hook me in. The hooks are what aren't here to hook me in.
It's funny actually you mentioned that. I did listen to the 2020 EP, and I felt like it worked so much better than the album. It's shorter, and you can hear the differences on each track because you're only getting 5-6 tracks or whatever it was. Each track had something slightly different about it, and it stood out more. Whereas this, it just didn't have that for me. Bit of a strange one, but okay. So ratings for this one from Alustrium. Kyle, what did you rate this one?
I'm gonna go in with a solid 3 out of 5.
Yep. Scoring this one is difficult because they're a really talented band. I feel like I can't fault the level of playing on this at all, but there were just elements I wish they'd emphasised more, just the heavier parts or the blackened parts or the melodic parts. I just wish there'd been more of it. The production was also just a little bit lacking in character as well. Just didn't elevate the album. I'm going to go 3 as well. I think it's a 3 out of 5. Yeah, 3 out of 5 for me. Duncan?
Yes, I'm the same. You can be the best musicians in the world, but you're not writing a musician's tutorial. What you're writing is an album, and an album needs songs, and this has a lot of songs with no hooks, so it's a 3.
Okay, good stuff. So this one,
I will say, just to kick at the end here, just to be I'd be also interested to see some of this live. Because that might be where the personality starts to shine through in a live environment. A lot of the sterility in this might actually come from just the production itself.
That's true, very true.
I think you're right,
So it drops on the 18th of June on Unique Leader Records. If you want to check them out, it's facebook.com/Alustrium, and I'll put a link in the description below to their Facebook and any pre-orders for the album. Thanks for checking out the review, guys. Much appreciated. Any thoughts and opinions on this one, let us know. Stick some comments in. Happy to hear them. That is review. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.